Welcome to a deep dive into, well, early 20th century psychotherapy. We're going to be looking at excerpts from Hugo Münsterberg's Psychotherapia.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, he was a Harvard professor,
Right.
really pushed for a scientific approach to, understanding the mind. So get ready to explore how psychologists back then saw mental health and treatment. And you might be surprised by how much of it resonates even today.
Yeah, what's really interesting here is that Mr. Berg, he insisted on a really solid foundation of psychology, especially the physiological side. He wanted to really understand how the brain worked in a normal state,
Yeah.
before even trying to tackle what goes wrong.
He wasn't satisfied with just labeling these mental states, was he? Like, it seems like he really wanted to get under the hood and tinker with the engine a bit.
Exactly. He saw the mind as this complex system. And to understand it, you really needed to break it down into its fundamental elements. Each thought, each feeling had a corresponding physical process happening in the brain. And it's remarkable how this kind of foreshadowed what neuroscientists are doing today, with brain imaging, mapping those intricate networks.
So for Münsterberg, explaining a mental state was almost like tracing its neural pathway in the brain.
Precisely. And he used examples like brain damage from a stroke to illustrate this point. If a specific area of the brain is damaged, you see specific mental deficits.
Right.
It really underscores how intertwined our mental lives are with the physical workings of our brains.
It makes you wonder what Münsterberg would think of all the advancements we've made in neuroscience, in the last century.
Absolutely.
But let's move on to something that really caught my eye when I was reading this. His ideas about suggestion. I mean, think about it. How much does suggestion shape your daily life? Are you aware of how it influences your decisions?
That's a great question. Münsterberg argued that suggestion is really woven into the very fabric of our lives, working by planting an idea in our minds so strongly that it actually suppresses any opposing ideas. And it's not just about overt persuasion. Think about education, advertising, even art. They all rely on suggestion to work their magic.
I love the example he gives about a skilled painter. Who can make you believe in a scene that totally contradicts, your experience, just by capturing your attention so completely?
And suggestion can go even deeper, influencing not just our actions, but also our perceptions and beliefs. He describes this fascinating example of someone under hypnosis, perceiving a library as a garden, picking imaginary flowers.
Wow, that's almost like rewriting reality, huh?
Absolutely.
Which makes you question what we perceive as real.
Absolutely. And this brings us to how Münsterberg viewed hypnosis. He saw it as a state of heightened suggestibility, driven by focused attention. Not partial sleep, like some people thought.
Right.
Yeah.
He compares it to extreme attention, where you're so absorbed in an idea that you suppress any resistance and just act accordingly.
Right. He was really fascinated by the techniques used to induce hypnosis.
Yeah.
From staring at an object to listening to monotonous sounds. Have you ever experienced moments of heightened suggestibility where you were easily swayed by someone's words?
I think we all have at some point, like that feeling when you're completely engrossed in a movie and you lose track of your surroundings,
Yeah, exactly. But here's where Münsterberg kind of diverges from some of his contemporaries. He flat out rejected the idea of a subconscious mind.
Oh, really?
Yeah. For him, it was all about consciousness or purely physiological processes happening in the brain without our awareness.
So no hidden realm of the mind where secret desires or memories lurk.
Right. He was quite adamant about it.
Yeah.
He even challenged popular ideas about co-consciousness and automatic writing.
Huh.
He saw those phenomena as either a splitting of the personality or, purely physiological things happening in the brain. It really makes you think critically about the nature of consciousness.
It definitely challenges some assumptions. And on that note, let's move on to a concept that might seem a little surprising in the context of mental health. Work and discipline. What do you make of Münsterberg's take on this?
Well, it's actually very relevant to our lives today. Münsterberg believed that modern life, while fast-paced, wasn't inherently more damaging to our mental health than previous eras. The problem, he thought, was our lack of discipline and our, inability to focus.
So he kind of makes this connection between our craving for constant stimulation and our lack of mental training, almost.
Yeah.
We haven't learned to concentrate on a single task. And that leads to mental clutter and just this weakened ability to resist distractions.
Think about your own struggle to focus amid constant notifications and all these distractions. Münsterberg would argue that that's a sign of, weakened mental discipline,
Right.
and that this constant bombardment might be making us lose our capacity for that deep focus, something he valued highly.
So what was the solution according to him? Did he have any practical advice?
Discipline. It was all about training our minds to focus, finding meaningful work that truly engages us, and requires effort.
So I guess he wasn't advocating for becoming workaholics.
No, not at all.
But wouldn't this emphasis on discipline kind of clash with like the modern emphasis on self-care and avoiding burnout?
That's a great question.
How do we reconcile those two ideas?
Yeah, and it brings us to another key theme in the book, the importance of balance. Münsterberg's vision of mental health was about balance in all areas of life.
Okay.
Work and rest, discipline and enjoyment, intellectual pursuits, emotional development.
So it's not about rigidly adhering to a single method,
No.
but about finding a personalized approach that addresses your specific needs, your specific strengths, and
Sure.
promotes like a sense of balance and well-being.
Right. It's about recognizing that there isn't this one-size-fits-all solution to mental well-being.
That sounds like such a modern concept, but here it is,
Yep.
over a century ago.
Exactly. We've covered a lot of ground here, from the mind-body connection to suggestion, hypnosis, and the surprising role of discipline. It's fascinating to see how some of these ideas, while controversial in their time, have echoes in modern psychology.
It seems like Münsterberg was ahead of his time in many ways. Now, before we dive into the specifics of his methods, let's take a moment to consider this idea of balance. What areas of your life, dear listener, might need a bit more balancing? And how can you cultivate a more disciplined mind in this age of constant distraction? We'll be back soon to explore more of Münsterberg's insights.
So now that we've kind of laid the groundwork, you might be wondering how Münsterberg actually put these ideas into practice. What were his methods for treating mental illness?
Well, he had a range of approaches, from like general lifestyle recommendations to more specific techniques, like hypnosis. Let's start with the broader picture. It seems like Münsterberg was a big believer in taking a holistic view of his patients' well-being.
Oh, absolutely. He recognized that factors like nutrition, sleep, your social surroundings, even the type of work you do and the leisure activities you engage in, could all play a role in mental health.
So it wasn't as simple as just prescribing rest for everyone, right?
Not at all. Remember his emphasis on meaningful work and engagement. He believed in striking a balance between exertion and recuperation.
Right.
He argued that finding work that aligns with your abilities and preferences could actually be a powerful antidote to mental distress.
It's interesting how he challenged the notion that modern life was inherently more stressful. He seemed to think it was more about our inner attitude than the actual circumstances.
He argued that a well-disciplined mind, trained to focus and resist distractions, is better equipped to navigate the complexities of modern life. And if you think about it, that's incredibly relevant today in the age of information overload and constant stimulation.
He even suggested that a lack of this mental discipline could contribute to like a range of issues, from difficulty concentrating to feeling overwhelmed by everyday tasks. It makes you wonder if some of our modern day struggles with anxiety and stress could be traced back to this lack of focus.
It's certainly something to consider. And this is where his emphasis on training children from a young age, to develop this mental discipline comes in. He advocated for a balanced approach to child rearing.
Okay.
One that combined rigorous learning with activities that fostered, emotional and character development.
Oh, it's about equipping individuals with the tools they need to thrive mentally and emotionally from a young age.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the more specific methods that Münsterberg used. He was a strong advocate for the therapeutic power of suggestion, wasn't he?
He was. And not just in the context of hypnosis. He believed that even simple acts, like a physician offering encouragement or a change in a patient's social surroundings, could have a suggestive impact on their mental state.
It's almost like recognizing the power of the placebo effect, even if he didn't call it that.
Exactly. He also talked about addressing negative autosuggestions.
Yeah.
Those self-defeating thoughts that can trap you in a cycle of distress. Münsterberg believed that these could be countered.
He even suggested techniques like autosuggestion, where you consciously repeat positive affirmations to counter negative thought patterns. It's amazing to think that he was talking about this over a century ago before, like the rise of cognitive behavioral therapy, which incorporates similar principles.
It's fascinating how these early ideas about the power of our thoughts
Mhm.
foreshadowed some of the therapeutic approaches we use today.
Right.
But of course, we can't talk about Münsterberg without addressing his views on hypnosis,
Right.
which was, a central tool in his practice.
And from what we've discussed so far, it seems like he saw hypnosis as a way to tap into this heightened suggestibility and influence a patient's mental state.
That's right. He viewed hypnosis as a state induced through techniques that narrowed the focus of attention and increased receptivity to suggestions. And he was very meticulous in his descriptions of various hypnotic techniques,
Right.
emphasizing the importance of tailoring the approach to each individual patient.
So not a one-size-fits-all approach to hypnosis?
No, he even distinguished between different levels of hypnotic states,
Ah.
noting that even milder forms, which he sometimes referred to as hypnoid states, could be therapeutically effective.
Okay.
So imagine it as a spectrum of suggestibility, with different techniques and approaches needed to reach different depths.
And he was also careful to distinguish hypnosis from pathological states like hysteria.
Yes.
He emphasized that hypnosis could be induced and terminated at will, unlike the persistent symptoms of hysteria.
He also acknowledged the potential for misuse,
Mhm.
cautioning against using hypnosis for entertainment or without proper training. He took the ethical implications very seriously.
It's clear that Münsterberg was very thoughtful in his approach to hypnosis, but while he recognized the power of suggestion, he also emphasized the importance of understanding the root causes of a patient's distress.
He was like a detective,
Yeah.
looking for clues in the patient's past.
Hmm.
He advocated for a thorough analysis of their history, searching for past experiences or suppressed emotions that might be contributing to their current symptoms.
He even explored dream analysis,
Right.
recognizing that dreams could offer insights into the unconscious workings of the mind, even though he didn't believe in a subconscious as a separate entity.
He was particularly interested in uncovering what he called complexes.
Okay.
These clusters of emotionally charged memories or desires that could exert a powerful influence on a person's thoughts and behaviors. He believed that identifying and addressing these underlying complexes, often through techniques like free association or dream analysis, could help the patient break free from these unconscious influences.
It's like unearthing hidden treasure, uncovering those buried emotional knots that are causing so much distress. One technique he mentions that I found particularly interesting is what he called sidetracking.
That's a fascinating one. It involved linking a troubling memory or experience to a new set of associations,
Okay.
essentially redirecting the emotional energy associated with that complex. It was about reframing those negative associations and creating new, more positive connections.
He gives an example of a patient who developed a fear of walking after nearly falling into a hole.
Right.
And he helped this patient by having them repeatedly imagine themselves successfully jumping over the hole. It's like rewiring their emotional responses through mental imagery and suggestion.
It's a great example of how he used creative techniques to help patients overcome their fears and anxieties. Now, it's important to acknowledge that some of Münsterberg's views, particularly on topics like the subconscious and the treatment of certain conditions, might be considered outdated by today's standards.
Well, yeah, that's to be expected given how much our understanding of the mind has evolved, I guess.
Right.
But what's remarkable is how many of his core ideas about the mind-body connection, the power of suggestion, the importance of mental discipline, they still resonate with contemporary approaches to mental health.
He was truly a visionary in many ways,
Yeah.
laying the groundwork for a scientific and psychologically informed approach to understanding and treating the complexities of the human mind.
And that's what makes exploring his work so fascinating. It's like
Right.
taking a journey through the evolution of our understanding of ourselves. A reminder that even as knowledge and practices change, there are these enduring insights that continue to shape our view of the human mind. Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, take a moment to reflect on what we've covered so far. Which of Münsterberg's methods or ideas stands out to you the most? And how might his emphasis on a scientific, psychologically informed approach to mental health inform your own journey of self-discovery and well-being? It's amazing to see how much Münsterberg's ideas, foreshadowed modern psychology. But he wasn't working in a vacuum, right? I'm curious, how did he see his work fitting into the broader historical context of psychotherapy?
Yeah, that's a great point. Münsterberg was very aware of the history of his field.
Mm-hmm.
He actually traced the evolution of ideas about mental illness.
Okay.
From, ancient beliefs about demonic possession to the emergence of more scientific and psychological perspectives.
So he acknowledged that how we understand mental illness is, influenced by the beliefs of the time.
Exactly. He talked about how different cultures viewed and treated mental distress,
Right.
highlighting the impact of societal norms. For example, he mentioned that in ancient China, mental illness was often attributed to, like, a fox spirit, and treatment involved rituals to banish the spirit.
That's such a different way of thinking about it. It
Right.
really shows how much our understanding of mental health has been shaped by the prevailing ideas of different times and places.
He even discussed how language, particularly ancient languages known only to priests or healers, could be used to enhance the suggestive power of rituals and treatments.
So in a way, he saw a connection between those ancient practices and his own emphasis on the power of suggestion.
I think so. And, moving closer to Münsterberg's own era, he discusses the rise of animal magnetism and mesmerism in the 18th century. This laid some of the groundwork for modern hypnosis.
Right. I remember reading about Franz Mesmer, who believed he could influence like a magnetic fluid in the body to induce healing. Wasn't he quite a controversial figure?
He was, but his methods, though controversial, really captured the public imagination and sparked this interest in mind-body therapies.
Münsterberg even mentions a student of Mesmer, Marquita Pusiger, who discovered artificial somnambulism, essentially an early form of hypnotism where individuals could be influenced by suggestions.
Yeah, it was a significant step in the evolution of suggestive therapies, paving the way for figures like James Braid, who coined the term hypnotism and emphasized the role of suggestion in inducing this state.
So we see this gradual shift away from those like more mystical explanations towards a more scientific understanding of hypnosis as like a psychological phenomenon.
Exactly.
And of course, Münsterberg himself became a leading figure in this movement, advocating for its therapeutic use.
He also discussed broader trends in the treatment of mental illness, particularly in the 19th century. He highlighted the shift from viewing mental illness as, purely demonic or spiritual, to recognizing it as a medical and psychological issue.
He talked about those early hospitals for the mentally ill and the growing emphasis on like humane treatment.
He mentioned figures like Philippe Pinel and Johann Christian Reil, who advocated for a more compassionate and therapeutic approach.
It's a reminder that the path towards a more humane and scientific understanding of mental health has been a long and challenging one.
Absolutely. Now, in the final chapter of Psychoterapia, Münsterberg looks to the future. He outlines his vision for what he called mental hygiene. This comprehensive approach to promoting mental well-being and reducing the incidence of mental illness.
So it's not just about treating existing conditions, but about like preventing them in the first place.
Exactly. He believed in creating conditions that fostered mental health, emphasizing everything from education and social reform to individual lifestyle choices and psychological interventions.
He sounds like a true advocate for public health, but focused on the mind rather than the body.
He really was. And he emphasized the importance of, a balanced lifestyle, meaningful work, intellectual stimulation, emotional regulation, healthy relationships.
It's like a blueprint for a society that prioritizes mental health and well-being. It sounds remarkably holistic, recognizing the connections between individuals, like social conditions and mental health.
And he even discussed the role of law and social justice in creating a more mentally healthy society, arguing that fairness, equality, a sense of security contribute to, individual and collective well-being.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into psychoterapia, it's clear that Hugo Münsterberg's work is this like rich tapestry of ideas about the human mind. While some of his views might be considered outdated today,
Of course.
his core principles, the mind-body connection, the power of suggestion, the importance of discipline, and the need for balance, they still resonate with us today.
Absolutely. He was a pioneer in advocating for a scientific and psychologically informed approach to mental health. And his vision for mental hygiene reminds us that promoting mental well-being is a collective effort, requiring both individual action and societal change.
It's been a fascinating journey exploring Münsterberg's world. We've uncovered this historical perspective that sheds light on how far we've come in our understanding of the mind, but also how much these like core principles remain relevant.
Absolutely.
As you navigate your own life, dear listener. Remember the power of your mind, the importance of seeking balance, and the possibilities of growth and healing. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. I